Hi there, and welcome to a new video titled How to Win Your Mini League. My name is Ryan from the Football Chatbox. I'm joined by two special guests who also have mini league winning experience. You're after like a trophy. This is one of mine, not from the Australian leagues, but one of my work colleagues. One of my mates' work leagues. I'm in that, and basically, I've won it twice on the bounce, but this time, the guy who won it for the first time is leading by 100 points. So it's going to be a hard chase down. But anyways, we'll talk about the strategies that we go into trying to win a mini league. And I've got the Australian Elite Qualifier, last season's Australian Elite Qualifier winner in Damon, and last season's Australian Twitter League Twitter League winner in Meera. And both of you are this time in the Australian Elite League because of winning those two leagues at the moment. So, first of all, how are you doing? And how's your season going so far? Um, who wants to go first?
Yeah, I guess I've started relatively strongly. It feels like a lot of people who are usually up there in rank started pretty slowly, and then have started to come good at sort of this point, which I guess we'll get into why that is throughout the video. But yeah, currently ranked about 50K. A couple of rank swings recently have got me scared, but getting there.
Okay, and Mira.
Ryan, thank you so much for having us on and to chat about our mini league winning season. I can't say the same about this season for me at the moment. It's not going that well for me. I'm around that sort of 700K, 800K sort of mark at the moment. But I'm definitely eyeing up my mini league. So the managers that are around me trying to kind of suss out what their moves are going to be. So yeah, very excited to talk about what can give us a bit of an edge.
Awesome. And I'm also very in a similar position to you, Mira. But the idea for me, at least on like my friends mini league, is to try and get into the top three, because we receive prizes for the top three. So that's the idea. But same thing with the Australian league, in terms of the elite and the elite qualifiers. I guess people are trying to get promoted. And in the elite league, we're trying to avoid relegation. Who win it is the idea. So we'll talk about some of the tips that we used last season to help us. And hopefully it will help you this season. And maybe this probably will be the same type of strategies that we're going to try and implement this season as well. So hopefully, even if you're watching this, maybe not this season, but like like season later, the ideas should technically still apply unless we get some new chips later down the line and the game changes drastically. But this is most likely should apply next season as well. So let's start with the first tip, and this is from Damon. Planning.
Yeah, I think planning is, as much as it might be obvious to some, I think it's like just the best way to get ahead of a large amount of players. It gives you a massive advantage straight away. But what does planning mean? What does it look like? It's probably going to be a common theme with what we talk about. There are exceptions all over the place in FPL, and that's what we love and hate about it. But yeah, generally speaking, planning is critical. And what it is not looking too short term. Short term can be 1 or 2 weeks. It's so easy to chase that. You know, Sheffield United at home fixture this season. We all thought Luton away would be good fun, but it's turning out to be one of the harder fixtures. But yeah, just those sort of examples you see, those fixtures light up and they can be so easy to chase. Whereas I like to look at it in 4 to 6 week blocks at least. For a couple of reasons. One is obviously I believe that over the 6 week period, I'm going to get more points than someone who thinks shorter term 1 to 2 weeks. The other thing is that if you do plan on transferring a player out after 1 to 2 weeks, you've got to remember that someone else is going to get injured. You need to essentially just plan. If you had to stick with that player you're transferring in forever, would you be okay with it? Sometimes asking yourself that question can be the difference between picking them and not picking them. So yeah, and just a couple of examples. If people like examples, I'm probably going to go to a couple of examples throughout. But I think Gordon was a great one this week, where in saying that he did have 2 or 3 good fixtures coming up, and Luton at home so much. I almost broke my plan and went to Gordon, but I held Garnacho, which I'm very happy about. But yeah, he was one. And then obviously, look, the injury you can't plan for. So for those who did go, it's not necessarily a bad move. But another one is a Chelsea attacker. Palace away this week looks great. But then after that, they've got City, blank, Brentford away, Newcastle, and Arsenal. So, and Chelsea are not great at the best of times. So I wouldn't be pouncing too hard there.
Fair enough. You mentioned planning, and not to go too short term. Here I am thinking about a potential Darwin Nunes move from Solanke to Darwin Nunes move for the double, and then potentially ditch or even bench. I can bench in 26, but Meera, what do you think?
Yeah, I have to agree with Damon with that. And last season, especially, I was a lot more patient with my transfers. And I think a lot of that was largely down to, I think, just trying to play the long game a little bit more because it was my second season. So my first season, I was making, lots of transfers, taking lots of hits, not really understanding the game, still getting to know it. And so with my second season, I sort of went the other way. I decided to be a bit more patient, a lot more strategic, thinking 4 to 6 weeks, game weeks ahead. Started thinking about chip strategies a lot more. It was almost like, it was, I was learning a little bit around. So from a learning kind of the curve of learning and just generally like applying that to my work and, some of the work that I do anyway, which is around coaching and training and stuff like that. And there's this thing about where, you have this hype, the first season is the hype and you're kind of like, I want to do this, I want to do that, just make the transfers, short-term picks and just kind of learn and just keep going. And then there's this honeymoon period, where you're doing really well, you've understood the game, everything is a bit more cruisy. And then there's occasionally a bit of a slump that comes along. I feel like I'm in that slump at the moment where I was super focused in that second season of where I was, in the honeymoon period where I was being a little bit more thoughtful, mindful in my, planning and strategies thinking forward. But when things go well, they go really well, right? But when things go bad, they go really bad as well. And this is where, Damon, what you said about, staying on course and not sort of, jumping on the bandwagon or the hype. I think we're going to talk about the hype a little bit later as well in this. But staying on course is really important, but having a plan is even more important as well, even if it's like several game weeks ahead.
Yep, agree. One thing I kind of want to ask you guys both is, we mentioned about planning. Now, as probably, I guess, engaged managers, the one advantage you have is that you know when potential doubles or blanks could happen. And that could also play as a disadvantage as well, because you look at teams, and I'm going to bring Richarlison in this specific situation, who I don't own, but they had a really good run of fixtures. And in my head, I was like, oh, they have a blank in 26. And I was thinking about that blank in 26, which was back in then, like 6 game weeks more to go. Like, no, they have a blank in 26. I kind of have to navigate through all of that. And you kind of avoid that player, and they continue to do well and do well and do well, while others just jump onto that player and they're like, okay, when it comes to blank in 26, we'll deal with it at that moment. So where do you find that balance? Because I've kind of now gone, okay, this is maybe a lesson that I should learn. I tell that to myself and I go and do it again the next time. But now with blank game week 29 coming up, and I guess the same thing probably applies to doubles as well. We focus so much on double game weeks that we tend to miss out on players who have single game weeks, so good single game weeks as well. So where do you strike that balance?
I mentioned exceptions.
Yeah.
This is probably a good
Okay.
example. I'm in the same boat. I don't own Richarlison. It was probably about 3 weeks ago where I specifically, I knew I was going to get him. Weeks earlier, I was like, as soon as Sonny goes to the Asian Cup, I will own Richarlison. That was before it even scored a goal. And then the Haaland stuff came, and I decided that if I went to Garnacho, I would have enough money to go straight to Haaland without taking a hit. Now, Haaland didn't come back quick enough, and I had to watch Richarlison smash in goals whilst I had 9 million in the bank and Garnacho struggling to get anywhere near a goal. So, yeah, I mean, that's like a part of the planning. And then referring to game week 26 as well, of course, that was a factor. Yeah, look, sometimes you've just got to go with your gut, but it's also, I guess, important to plan, right? Like, I go back to the Gordon one as another sort of example. If he played against Luton full 90 minutes and scored a hat trick and got 2 assists, it almost doesn't matter what he gets for the next 3 weeks, right? Because you're so far ahead. Sometimes you're going to get lucky like that. And Richarlison owners It's a good transfer. I can't question it. But at the same time, no one expected this. So it's no point getting too hung up on it. But it's a hard watch as a non-owner.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I'm a Richarlison owner. And interesting that you say like as soon as Son is out, to bring him in. I actually brought him in before Son had gone. And I think it was around the time when Madison, like Madison got injured and I didn't bring in, Richarlison straight away. But you could see Richarlison was going to play, a lot more. And he was, even though he wasn't playing in the center at the time when Sonny was around, but like you say, occasionally you got to go with your gut instinct, and there weren't that many other options up there as well.
Yeah, fair enough. I agree. It's just that you look at it now that the points have come and you're like, missed opportunity. But I guess there are other opportunities still because there's still a long way to go. At time we're recording, it's like 23, game week 23. You have another 15 game weeks to go with plenty of blanks and doubles as well. So we'll move to the second point, which is getting decisions wrong are not always a bad thing. Take us off, Damon.
Yeah, so it's probably a good little segue from Richarlison. We'll stick on the Richarlison topic, but I'd refer to Diego Jota, somewhat similar price, I guess, within $1 million. Probably a couple of people would have had to pick between those two players. And you'd have to say, I think Richarlison's probably slightly ahead, but Jota had that massive week against Bournemouth. So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but over the last 3 weeks, they'd be pretty similar. Of course, if you own both, you're laughing. But yeah, I guess to what the reason I've put that in here is that if you find yourself making these decisions where your player scores, say, 50 points over the next 5 game weeks, and the player you also wanted to get also does, or maybe scores 55, look, again, it comes back to it's super frustrating to watch, and FPL sometimes isn't fun when that sort of stuff happens. But sometimes you got to give yourself credit and say, look, I was deciding between these two players, both of them were correct. What's actually worse, in my opinion, is when you're deciding between two players and then you look back, oh, I made that decision 5 weeks ago. How did it go? Oh, wow, I got really lucky. The other player was, blanked, got an assist, and then got dropped to the bench. He's not even best 11 anymore. And the one I've got's got 50, 60 points and is player of the month. Now that's great. You've obviously, massively up on that decision, but why were you thinking about the other player in the first place? You're not going to get that decision right every single time. So just like reviewing, okay, did I look at his stats? Did I watch games? Did I just like the look of him? Like, what is it, right? Sometimes you get sucked into stuff. Maybe that's what happened with me with Garnacho a little bit, and I got lucky today. But yeah, that's essentially, if you're picking between two good players, it's a good thing. But if you're picking one and one does way better than the other, maybe just try to review why.
Meera?
Yeah, I agree, and to add further to it as well, I think like we can be quite harsh on ourselves when it comes to looking at the fixtures as well. I mean, take the Luton Newcastle match for example, right? So we've got to almost recalibrate our thinking on some of the teams. So Luton, for somehow they've been playing really well, and in fact, I feel like I'm rooting for like Luton in terms of like I'm cheering them on and just kind of thinking, wow, these guys are playing really, really well. And so I feel like we got to recalibrate our thinking around some of the teams. So it's not just about like picking the player and just considering the players, thinking about the team as a whole. Something I've definitely realized a little bit more when I'm picking my captaincy picks this season. It's not been going as great. And we can be a bit harsh on ourselves when it comes to picking the players, right? Like if you look at the Gordon sort of situation, Gordon was a good pick, for this week. And in fact, those that held on to Gordon, fantastic that you did as well, because he continued getting some returns, along the way. But again, Newcastle as a whole haven't had such a great ride either, especially defensively. So, those that held on to Trippier, I dropped Trippier very quickly. As soon as I realized, I mean, I probably held on to him a lot longer than I probably should have, but I did drop him when others were still holding on to him as well. So it's really tough, and we can be really hard on ourselves when you look at the fixtures and you look at the play, look at the team as a whole, not to get hung up on it too much and not to look back. That's a really good point.
Yeah, fair enough. I've still got Trippier, and now look at Newcastle's defensive stats. The numbers are not great. They're like the bottom 4 for expected goals conceded. And then you look at Gordon, right? If you watch the last game that they played, not this one, the one before that, and he was on it. He was just getting chances, plenty. Like, it kind of made sense why he was also a captaincy consideration this week as well. So it's not that the move was a bad decision. I guess it's just lies of bad luck, I would put it down to. And that's basically variance. Now, Damon, you started Garnacho. I put Garnacho on the bench. So
Yeah.
the differences are like you need a bit of luck at times, but you can't put yourself down as well, I guess, when the move goes wrong as well, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And at least you own him, right? That's
Yeah.
half the job. It just comes back to similar to what you're saying. You have him for a reason. You didn't quite get the decision 100%, but at least you had him.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about, I guess you have to. There was this. I think who was it? I think Late Riser mentioned this on the FPL. It was like you have to put yourself in a position to get lucky if you wanted to get lucky, and to do that, you have to be willing to take a certain level of calculated risk as well. Where sometimes it goes wrong, it is what it is. But if it goes right, you're shooting up the ranks. You're shooting up your mini leagues.
Yeah.
I think this season it's been interesting with like spreading the funds, right? So we've now got all these benching dilemmas as a result. And so, last season we had Kane, and so, there was a few more options, and so the spreading of the funds wasn't as like it's pretty tough at the moment because we've gone and spread the funds. We've got 5 players in midfield that we want to play. We've got 3 players up front that most have, right? Everyone is either playing 3-4-3, or they're playing 3-5-2, right? But very likely 3-4-3 at the moment. And we've got this fun spread, and so Garnacho, is on your bench. Like, I put Foden on my bench this week, and I have no idea how that's going to go down. But yeah,
I'm secretly hoping for a Foden benching, but that's a different story because Garnacho is 16 pointers sitting there. But yeah, like, see, that's the difference, right? I got him. So the guy in my mini league that I'm chasing, he also put Foden on his bench and he's first, but he started Garnacho as well. So things are roundabout. So he got that 16-point Garnacho boost, whereas no one else in the mini league kind of owns Garnacho, and I've got Garnacho and I've benched him. So he's like full positive variance on there with Garnacho.
yeah, that's worked for me in the past actually, because my family mini league, which is what I feel like I'm playing for, that and the Australian Elite one as well now, like just to kind of stay up there. But my family mini league, I've got 2 Man United supporters in the family, and in the past, like when they held on to Bruno and Rashford for a really long time, and so I knew that they would just keep playing them or captaining them as well. So I was like, well, okay, I'm playing. They're the ones that I'm playing against. So I can anticipate some of their moves.
Exactly, that's true. We'll get to that, and I guess that kind of brings up your point 3, Meera. This is yours one. Scout opponent teams.
Yes,
take it away.
yes. I did a lot of this last season. I think when it was down to the wire. So I think it was Pankin, who was I think Stu, Cody, myself, and I think Damon. I think you were probably in the Twitter mini league anyway, but you were in the elite qualifier as well. So I think there was like 4 or 5 of us that were, just getting position 1, 2, 3, and I was just eyeing up all the teams, just trying to look at like what the teams, how they're shaped right now, anticipating some of the moves. Some of them were very similar. There was only like maybe 2 or 3 differentials between them. So what I started to do, and this is where live FPL is really good for that. I find anyway, where you can open up the league and you can actually open up all of the teams and you can start sort of looking at what the differences are between them. So if you opened up like the top 2, for example, you can see what the differences are. And so if I was sitting in second, there was occasionally like Stu was up top, I can sort of make a quick assessment based on the current game week, what sort of moves that they're likely to make, because they're super engaged managers as well, right? And so, yeah, I was trying to work out like a bunch of pathways. And the good thing was, I mean, obviously there's been lots of iterations to live FPL. And so it's a lot more feature heavy than what it was last season. But you can like click on the name and it takes you to their live FPL page as well. And you can see some of the decisions or the transfers they've made and what it's equated to, like the gains and all of that. So I went into full on, like I say, full stalker mode last season, looking at everyone, like at those that were around me, because there was literally 3 or 4 points between us all, and it wasn't much. And I think right at the end, between Stu and myself, there was just some, I think there was just a couple of I'm pretty sure. I think the difference was I had a chip left and Stu didn't. I think that's what it came down to. It's like one of our chips we had left, and I knew that that was going to be my, like the trump card sort of thing at the end, to play my chip. And I think Stu ended up taking a hit, or he missed. I think he missed the deadline or something like. I'm not sure what happened, but I was way ahead by that point, and so yeah, it was a really good. It was. I mean, it was a lot of fun, but it was very competitive. It was very competitive, and it was the same with like I think a couple of other mini leagues where I was like, either in first position, second position, that kind of thing, and we just kept switching it around. But yeah, I felt like it was really important to just work out what sort of formations that they were playing, what formations I would be playing, anticipating things like, okay, well, if they've got Foden in the team, I've got Bernardo in the team, or whoever it may be. Um, Try and sort of change it up a little bit where possible. So, I did do that in a couple of places. And I think last season, it was just little things like that where you can look at your opponents, teams, and you can go like extreme and start sort of looking at, every bit of detail, or at the very least, just have a look at, what transfers they've made historically in the past. That's the other thing. Like if you click on through Live FPL, and I feel like I'm giving away, a whole bunch of tricks now, but if you don't know already, if you click on the name, it's like the top part, it takes you to their the FPL website, and then you can go to game week history. Now, if you're thinking about bringing in a player, you can go and check out like the transfers that they've made. Sorry, not game week, the transfers. Now, if they've brought in a player already, the probability of them bringing that player back in soon is probably a little bit lower. So I was like, even looking at, okay, what players has this FPL manager brought in, and what is the probability of them bringing them back in so soon? Okay, it's fairly low, but I think it's a good fixture because our bias is going to tell us, I've already brought this player in, and I don't want to bring that player in again. And so yeah, so I was doing stuff like that as well, just to kind of like anticipate, their moves and trying to make my team a little bit more differential. Yeah, those were some of the things that I was doing last season.
Fair enough. Damon, take it away.
I think Meera's covered most of it. I guess I probably look at opponent teams for like over the weekend more than during the week. And this is just my personal opinion. I try to not let it impact my decision making until maybe later in the season. But that's just me. But what I do like to do is just know who everybody has whilst I'm watching, which maybe is a bit of an unhealthy obsession because it means like I'm riding every pass in a build up to an attack. I'm wanting their player to pass it early so they're less chance to get an assist and so on. That's how detailed it can get, which is a little bit toxic. But yeah, it's, and even during the week, you had it up. Yeah, you can see it on this page here, like 9 out of 12 players played. It's just a good way to keep track of, if you're on a red arrow, is it really that big of a red arrow? If you've got more players to play, sometimes you might, but if other people do as well, it is a red arrow. But yeah, I guess, 24 hours ago, I was on 100% red arrow, but I didn't have many playing, and then got lucky today, and I'm back even. And I know not everybody's captained Haaland. So in this particular game week, I think the two people who are ahead of me in the elite qualified haven't captained Haaland. So it's a huge opportunity for me tomorrow morning.
Yeah, so you got Haaland captain here. They've got Watkins and Solanke. But all of y'all have like 9 played, right? Now the difference, I guess, for them is you have Haaland, Foden, and only Haaland, Foden remaining. And you got the Haaland cap as well. Now
Yeah.
Chris has Haaland, Foden, and Edison. While Tom also has a defensive pick in terms of Walker, Foden, and Alvarez. Now you're kind of hoping in your situation, City don't keep a clean sheet, Foden and Haaland get the goals.
They always find a way to concede. I'm not worried.
That's the thing. So I guess like for me at least, but like if I was in a similar situation, what I look at is I go, okay, they're both playing a very 3-4-3 formation, based on how their team structure is. they've kind of tripled up on Arsenal. So let's say if Arsenal were, if they had a good run coming up, you would look at, okay, both of them have double Arsenal defense and Saka. So you can kind of differentiate slightly differently because, again, this goes to what Meera said of the possibility of moving out of a double Arsenal defense once you had them in and going to maybe double Arsenal attack instead, or even just having two Arsenal players and that third player from another team is so that's kind of the way you can differentiate. Now, Chris has Botman as a Newcastle player. Tom doesn't really have a Newcastle player in there in terms of defensive. And I guess Damon also doesn't have, but Newcastle are not defending right now that great. So you're in an advantage in one way. And I guess so would Tom be. But if Botman was to do well, like what Shah did like last week and get 17 pointers, then it's a different story. So those are the differentials that you kind of have in some situations. And then obviously we look at captaincy. Everyone's gone with somewhat of a different captaincy. Now, this is overall, I guess you would assume almost all the managers in the Australian elite are engaged managers. So we've got a lot of like Haaland caps, Solanke, Palmer, we've got Gordon as well. But if you look even at the bottom, like a lot of Haaland caps. So most of us are generally very engaged. So it's very hard to tell based on the mini league you're in terms of where the entire player base is looking like. So go ahead, Meera.
I was just going to say that's such a good point, and you just reminded me as well that one of the other things that I was looking at, and as I've been sort of getting to know, like the different managers. So as I mentioned earlier, around like my my family mini league and the United bias with a couple of family members, I also tried to work out whether they were a risk taker or a conservative FPL manager. And, you could see that from the captaincy picks as well. Like their usual captaincy picks were, quite conservative. And therefore I thought, okay, well, occasionally when there is a bit of a risk appetite, like do I sort of go for a different captain option? And so it's taking the opportunity to jump on those chances as well based on, the opponents around you and their risk appetite.
Indeed. And also, I guess one thing I have noticed is when you're leading, you can easily make it very hard for the chasing pack if the chasing pack is also a very engaged set of managers, because everyone is thinking similar thoughts. They're going to get in the similar players and you just start blocking. You're basically, it's like a chessboard. You're starting blocking players, and that's where I guess captaincy also comes into part, because that's one of the ways to slightly go different. And I think one of the things that I remember from last season was the game week 36, I think, when Newcastle had a double game week and a lot of people went Isaac versus Wilson captaincy, which was a swing as well. So I guess those are one of the few points where you can kind of go different. But I guess that leans towards when Damon said a bit more risky at the end of the season. Okay. Anything else to add on to that point, or should we go into, I guess, analyze trends and plan your chip strategies? Go ahead, Meera.
Yeah, like this one, again, I found myself in a position where I had a lot of time as well on my hands. It's really funny actually, because a lot of this, I mean, you're either an engaged manager that can make the time and good on you, if you can do that, or you're an engaged manager that just has time, or in between things. And in my case, I had a lot of in between sort of meeting time where I was not really part of those meetings, and I could doodle and think about my chip strategy and stuff like that as well. So I in hindsight, like I feel like in this season I wish I had taken the time to do a bit more planning ahead as well. So one of the things that I didn't do this season, and I did a lot more of last season, was jumping on the price rises and changes. And so price drops and price rises, where I was confident about my moves, so I just went for them, and I must have picked up, several in some weeks. And this season, not so much. I think I'm pretty sure I had several players dropping a couple of times during the international break, and yeah, it's been really frustrating. And that's what your opponents are doing, right? Your opponent is being very super strategic, and they are likely to be engaged managers, and so they are thinking about those types of things. They are thinking about the EO as well. And so, this time round, I thought, you know what, I'm not doing that well this season. Let me not think too much about all of those things and experiment in a slightly different way. But what gave me the edge last season was to be so switched on with EO, those of the EO of the players around me. Again, live FPL gives you that information. You can do the player combination on there as well. So the tool on there gives you the option to select several players and see the combination as well. And yeah, like I jumped on the players that I was confident about and increased my team value. And that was really beneficial towards the end, especially when I sold a bunch of players and I still had really good team value to bring in the team that I wanted towards my wild card, which I left very late till the end of the season last season.
Damon, anything to add?
Yeah, I think just around the team value, it's not the be all and end all, but it's certainly something that you need to keep an eye on. Just because the way the Premier League sets up as well, this season it's likely that there's going to be a double in 34 and 37, which means we're probably going to be wild carding
Around
before
that mark.
around that time. And then so if you can essentially just, while some players might be praying that a Pedro Neto gets a return at Arsenal away or something in game week 36. That's a random game. I don't know if they're playing at that time, but it's whilst you can have the extra little bit of money to afford, I guess an Eze or someone like that, just a little bit more. That can sometimes be the difference. I'm not sitting here saying you're going to need the money. I've finished seasons before with 3 million in the bank for the last couple of weeks. If you don't feel you need it, there's absolutely no need to spend it. But having that option is really helpful. And you even find managers that maybe for whatever reason start engaged in it, then sort of get lost. It is obviously a pretty busy fixture, especially around December. Maybe they lose track, don't keep an eye on their FPL team that much, then decide they want to take it seriously again in Feb, and their team value is way less than mine. And it's like, you can try as hard as you want, but unless you get pretty lucky, my team will always on paper look better than yours. So I think that's to keep in mind. Can be a grind, but it's worth it.
Yep, fair enough. Yeah, I guess that's kind of where I spoke to Meera as well. I think about this at the start somewhere earlier as well, where team value. I was like, I tend to focus on team value at the start of the season when price rises and falls are more hectic because there are a lot more casual involved managers as well. And then once you build that team value, after a point, I tend to focus more on fixtures and doubles and blanks because you've built enough team value where the tiny marginal differences are most likely, I guess, not too much because we have, I guess, one thing maybe live FPL could do with is not team value, but more of sell value.
Sell value,
which
yeah.
is kind of more important than your team value, because team value could depend on like, oh, I've held Palmer since like the start in like game week whenever he started doing really well when you got him at 4.9, whereas some others would have got him at like 5.3 or something. And that will also, I've seen many talk about the decisions in terms of selling Palmer versus holding Palmer, and those who got him late can potentially look to sell him for the upcoming blank, and also if they're blanking game week 29, whereas those who got him earlier when he was 4.9 have about $1 million on him in terms of team like value stored on him, and the chances that they get rid of Palmer are a bit more lower with Chelsea having a double that will come later down the season. So I guess those are the things that you kind of can keep in mind as well, and those are the stuff that probably blocks a manager from making certain moves because of value stored on a player and the ability to buy back as well.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I have to completely agree. And I mean, take the example also of most managers have sold Salah, at the moment as well, and those jumped early to bring in Haaland. Haaland's rate gone up in price how many times this week?
14.2 now.
Yeah,
today.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's just unpredictable, and I completely agree about sort of jumping on them early, like a lot earlier in the season. But those decisions that I chose not to kind of focus on the team value earlier in the season is now going to hurt me towards the end of the season when I'm thinking about bringing back Salah, for example, keeping Haaland as well, and probably wanting Son back in. And we can't have them all. So yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Damon, anything?
No, you mentioning Palmer though at that early price has brought back some bad memories. I again, like you're eyeing, I guess engaged managers are eyeing that player off as soon as he starts getting
Yeah.
minutes. Chelsea have a good run in 4 weeks, but in the meantime, he's got Spurs away, City at home,
Yes.
and Man United at Old Trafford, and then he goes and scores in all three of those games. Goes up 0.3. That was a filthy period in time, but that's okay. We all got him in there.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah,
True.
yeah.
I don't know. Maybe the ones who got on late now might be the ones who benefit because we could get rid of him without losing too much sell-on value.
Yeah, true.
So it swings and roundabouts. And another thing I guess we mentioned about chips. Something else that we can see from here is the amount of chips that people have used. That could also help you in terms of trying to plan. In terms of, okay, so certain people have used a triple captaincy, or might end up using a lot in game week 25. Some have used their bench boost already. Tian, FPL Plan has already used his bench boost. Paul in this has also used his wildcard. So you kind of know where your managers are going to play certain chips. And maybe now this is a bit more harder to do with the triple captaincy because you can only play it in very specific weeks if the fixtures present themselves. But the bench boost and the free hit, those are a bit more flexible, especially this season where we're going into this period and like a lot of weeks you have like these benches with good fixtures and you're like, oh, maybe I can play the bench boost this week. Maybe I can play the bench boost even in 25. That's also a possible situation. So I guess that's also one thing that will help you in terms of gaining a few points.
Yeah, sorry, just to jump in, it's probably a good little example here that Tom's used his bench boost already, and on this, I'm 46 points behind. But I guess, I need to keep in mind that I still have my bench boost, which in theory, let's call it 15 points better off. So, I guess I try to convince myself that I'm only around 30 points behind. And I don't have to take those massive risks yet. Just, it's something to just keep in mind. Keep an eye on. You don't want to make it an unnecessary risk if you don't want to.
Yep, that's true as well. I agree with that. And then we'll move into the last 2 points, which are mind the hype and emotional decisions. Meera.
Yeah, so this is something that I feel like I did really well last season. Also because I was traveling a lot last season, so I wasn't around to follow, Twitter, for example, when I think it was still Twitter anyway last season, for majority of it. So yeah, I wasn't really following too much of what was going on. So I was away for like, three weeks. Just over 3 weeks I was backpacking and I didn't have much signal either. And so, yeah, I didn't really, watch much. And that was like earlier on in the season for me as well. So the season started in August and I think I'd gone mid-August or, end of August or something. And that sort of set the precedence of the rest of the season for me because I was like, okay, well, I can do okay without consuming too much content and consuming too much information and getting sucked up into the Twitter bubble. And, I think when we were chatting about this earlier, it is a bubble. It is, a very small bubble. As well. And, most of the FPL managers that I'm playing against now in my Twitter, not my Twitter leagues, but in the mini leagues, in fact, are not even on Twitter. So yeah, I realized very quickly that, okay, I need to probably stay away from that a little bit more and not get sucked up into it. And
Meera, I think we lost you.
Trying to avoid the hype, the bandwagon, Oh, sorry.
Okay, wait.
Am I back?
Okay, you're back. You're back. You kind of went buffering out, and then I was
Am I back?
Yeah, you're back. You're back.
Oh no, I'm
Okay.
so sorry.
Go ahead,
What was the
repeating
last
it.
bit?
The Twitter bubble.
Yeah, okay, sorry. So the Twitter bubble, it is a bubble. There's always going to be a lot of hype, bandwagon, FOMO, when the player like, more recently Gordon, everyone was talking about Gordon. Yeah, we should bring in Gordon. Yeah, of course, like he's got good fixtures coming up. But, if you've got blanks and doubles coming up as well, you've got to consider what player can you bring in that is going to help you with the blanks and doubles as well, or one or the other, whatever your priorities may be. But yeah, so last season I didn't get sucked up into the bubble as much, and that was really good. And not to say that I have been this season, but I've probably been questioning my moves and decisions a little bit more than I had done previous season. And so, as a result, I'm looking at other content creators, what they're doing, what are they saying, like what's Twitter saying, what's the bandwagon saying, what are the trends saying. So these things can be really useful. Like earlier, we're talking about, look out for these things. But then on the flip side, it's so easy to make emotional decisions as a result as well, especially chasing previous week's points as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Damon, anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I guess the hype component of this point is, the content that's out there, whether it be YouTube or Twitter. We'll still call it Twitter, just keeps it simple. It's great. Personally, I wouldn't have it any other way. I love it. I'm not so much of a not that active on it, but I read so much and I spend far too many hours on it per day. And I love it. Funnily enough, though, my best ever FPL rank was before I found the world of FPL Twitter. So, it can be good and bad. It makes you more aware to things you might have missed. I think chip strategy, referring to the previous point, that's when content can really help. I personally just don't have the time to, figure out when someone's going to play or when the likely game weeks are. I need people to do that for me. But on the other hand, the hype trains that can start are just really, really hard to not be a part of sometimes. But you've just got to, if you can, try to do the research yourself and then see if people are talking about that player or not talking about that player. It's easier said than done, though, because all you have to do is open Twitter and it will be there. But yeah, I mean, I jumped on Trent and I think he got 1-0 injured and I kept telling people it's not worth it, but I gave in and wasted transfers on it. So yeah, sometimes it's good to jump on the hype, sometimes not so much, but you got to make your own decision.
Fair enough, true. Because it pays off at times. Sometimes it's like, yep, it doesn't. The other thing I guess is what the Twitter bubble does is it tends to focus a lot on very popular players from the bigger teams. Whereas some of the players from the smaller teams, like now I guess Cunha has scored a hat-trick. It's very hard to like not talk about him. But before that also, he's been delivering like silently, like taking over with points every week, and no one mentions it because it's not a big team. Now suddenly he's got a hat-trick and we're like, oh, maybe we should sell Solanke to Darwin and then Darwin to Matthias Cunha and game week 26 against Sheffield United. This is the kind of planning we've got to. But it's kind of way to know where the hive is moving towards, I guess. It's a hive mind mentality. And FPL Planet T, and he mentioned this on like FPL IQ. If you watch the bigger content creators and you see who they're suggesting, then you kind of know where the majority of the player base is kind of going. And then okay, do I go here if I want a differential, maybe I go slightly differently. So those, I guess there are pros and cons to it. But like you mentioned, Damon, like the pros, the chip strategy, trying to figure out all of this is quite complicated. I'll just rather go to Ben Crellin and just see what he's saying, and okay, this is how we do it.
Yeah.
But there are good and bad to it as well. So yeah, Haaland FOMO, Darwin FOMO at times.
Oh my God.
If Salah is announced fit in Klopp's press conference ahead of game week 24 against Burnley, so all of this is something that I guess it's good and bad, pros and cons. Yeah. And then finally, this one I read, sometimes you need to take a few risks if you are chasing. And I said this before, well, in terms of like when you're leading, it's easy to block. And that kind of puts the onus on the chasers to be slightly different. Which in one way, as someone who's leading, it could also be a disadvantage in terms of you're so focused on blocking managers that you also tend to miss out on good points as well. That's something also probably to keep in mind. And then suddenly, in a matter of a few weeks, things will switch easily. So that's one thing, I guess, to keep in mind. But when chasing, captaincy has been a big part this season with not a very, like last season, we had a steady steady Eddie in Erling Haaland. This season, he's gotten injured. Occasionally, he doesn't perform the same way. And then we have Salah. Salah's gone to AFCON. Now Salah is back and he's injured. So we don't know when he's going to come back as well. Haaland has risen in 0.3 and a majority of us have jumped on it because he keeps rising and we might be priced out. So we bought him in early. And then there are other various captains also appearing. So sometimes it might pay off. Like again, what point two, getting decisions wrong are not always a bad thing. Sometimes it pays off. Sometimes it doesn't. But you kind of have to take a few risks to put yourself in a position to be lucky. That's basically all I've got. Anything to add on to that one? Or
No, I think it's a great point, and I think the definition of a risk as well can be quite different. So like you can take calculated risks all throughout the season, from game week 1 if you want. A player I've probably taken calculated risks on over the last few seasons has been Son, even when he's and it's always not worked because he always finds a way to score it like at the Emirates or against those bigger teams, just because that's the type of player he is. But every time you look at the fixtures, if everybody owns a player but their fixtures are bad, back yourself. I think Trippier is probably a good example with the Newcastle defense. Meera spoke about it a little earlier around. Yes, Newcastle were getting worse, but so were the fixtures. So you can get off early if you really, I guess, have the guts to do it. And then I personally only take big risks later on in the season, but that's just because I don't want to ruin my season too early.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think the major risks tend to come in like 34, 35, probably even 35, 36, 37 is where like if I have to take a real risk, if you're like 30, 40 points back, you're not catching that in 3 game weeks easily. Especially if your manager who is above you is engaged as well. Chances are you're very unlikely to catch that up. So you kind of have to take major risk there. But if it's like what you mentioned, Damon, you have the bench boost, right? So that's probably about 15 points on average. So then you're about 30 points at the moment, which isn't too big, which can be cut down. I'm in a position where I'm like 100 points behind. So I kind of have to slightly edge away in terms of I kind of have to start taking the risk a bit more earlier if I'm to try and chase down rank. But again, those risks are not extreme risk in terms of like moving a high EO player to another low EO player. It's about moving maybe a 20% EO player or a player that they have, which is a decent EO, to maybe my differential. Like it could even be like the 3 City players. People go, okay, Haaland, Foden, and KDB. You could have Haaland, Foden, and your 3rd City player could be someone different. You don't have to have all 3. So that's where I guess kind of make the differences and then hope for the best.
Yeah.
The points go your way.
I have to agree with that. I'm in a similar boat to you, Ryan, where I'm probably going to start taking more risks now. Like I've been not really been taking that many risks. I've been playing it quite sort of straightforward, and I've probably got an incredibly different what do you call it, template team, at the moment. And thank you, Live FPL. It sort of gives you that information as well. So I've got I think it was like moderately template for quite a while, and then it was like 80% sort of template team, and I was like, oh shit, how did that happen? I better sort of look at bringing in a couple of differentials. So I think with taking risks, absolutely, but you got to pick your battles as well when you take those risks. Like if it's easy, if it's the going against Haaland, for example, when he's fully fit, is not the time where you take a risk, right? And chances are engaged managers won't be doing that. But it's easy to sort of fall into that trap as well by sort of thinking, okay, well, I've only got like 5 points. I'm only 5 points away, 10 points away. And the only way I'm going to be able to do this if I go against Haaland and go with, KDB or something. And of course, KDB is going to give you the goals, sure, but it's probably going to give you more assists, for example. And so do you go against KDB? Do you go against Haaland at that point? Probably not. But it's game weeks like what we just had, where we had maybe 5, captaincy picks, right? So we had so many options, and Haaland was probably towards the bottom of that list as well. With the likely captains like Watkins has returned so far, and Palmer returned as well. I don't think Richarlison was so much in the captaincy sort of pick list, but he was up there as well. And so Trippier, there was so many Trippier captaincies. And so, yeah, it's like that. These are the weeks that you do want to take that risk and go differential, and it could, blow up your game week and your season, or it could sort of tumble you right back as well. So, yeah, you got to pick your battles.
Yep, indeed. And I guess like these are the weeks where you can take those risk on as well, because when the captaincy is so different, it's not gonna hurt as much if it kind of goes wrong. Because the other thing I guess is something that I try to keep in mind is potentially having the other captain candidates as well in your team, because if you do tend to go against them, and if they go big, the damage isn't as big as well when you go against them, because you kind of halve their damage. But that can't always be the case, because like again, Richarlison for today didn't have him, and he was one of the potential captaincy options. Now, obviously, there is the other side to come with the City game yet to play. The likes of I've got Bernardo, Foden, and Haaland as captain. That could swing around easily as well. So it all depends on pick and choose your battles at the right time, probably. So yeah, that's basically all I guess we've got to add. Anything final to add before we end it?
Just final thoughts, or make sure you enjoy it. Sometimes it can be easy not to. I can sometimes get pretty down when it's bad, but yeah, no, just enjoy it. Whether it be like really engaged like the Australian elite leagues that we're in, or with your work friends, family. I guess, get the group chats going. That's what it's all about. Laugh at when people have double defense and it gets wiped out in the 93rd minute. Complain about that assist that's not given. That's what it's all about, right? And that's the reason we keep coming back every year. So yeah, that's how I'll end it from my side.
Meera, anything?
Yeah, I think you covered it beautifully. I completely agree. Have fun with it. I think that's the most important thing. It is a game at the end of the day.
Indeed. Put the banter in the group chats and enjoy your season as well. And I guess one thing to add is if the season is not going well, and let's say while the topic is trying to like how to win your mini league, and let's say I wouldn't say lost hope, but maybe if it's not going as well, take the time to try something different. Experiment as well is something I would add. Because you never know. It only takes a couple game weeks for things to change suddenly as well. Or maybe you take the lessons you learned from this season into next season and you try something from what you've learned from this season. But yeah, that's basically all we got. Thank you to Damon and Meera as well. Make sure to... actually, I'll let you all do it. Anything to plug?
Yeah, I'll plug in my X or Twitter handle. So you can find me at FPL Mez8 on Twitter or X, and also my YouTube channel, which is the same same handle even.
Indeed. Damon?
Yeah, not too much to plug, but my Twitter is @dbradakis. Good luck spelling that one, but if you do happen to
It's on
find
the video, I think.
there you go. It's on the video. So no, give me a follow if you do want to. You'll find me most of the time complaining about other people's scores rather than talking about my own. So if you can handle that, follow me. Otherwise, I don't mind.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And also, the links will be in the description for both of them. And make sure to hit the like button, subscribe while you're new, and hopefully this video has helped you. Thank you all.